Ethan Carter, 34 years. I didn't lose the woman I loved. I lost every chance to even meet her. And the worst part is, it wasn't because I wasn't trying. It was because of something I didn't understand about myself. Until it was already too late. If you looked at my life from the outside, nothing seemed wrong. I had a stable job, a decent apartment, a routine that made sense. I wasn't struggling financially. I wasn't isolated. I had friends. I went out. I lived what most people would call a normal life. But there was one thing missing, and the longer it stayed missing, the more it started to define everything else. I couldn't build a relationship, not a real one, not something that lasted. And at first, I didn't think much of it, because in your 20s, it's easy to explain. You just haven't met the right person yet. Give it time. Focus on yourself first. That's what everyone says. And for a while, I believed it, because it made sense, because it removed pressure, because it gave me time. But then, time kept passing, and nothing changed. I dated. Of course I did. Apps, introductions, random meetings, the usual ways people meet now. And on the surface, everything seemed fine. I wasn't awkward. I could hold a conversation. I wasn't unattractive. I knew how to present myself. I understood what people expected. At least, I thought I did. The first dates were always okay. Not amazing, but not bad. Good enough to think, this might go somewhere. We would talk, laugh, share stories. Everything felt normal. And then, something would happen. Not in a dramatic way. Not something obvious. Just a shift. A slight change in energy. A delay in responses. A message that felt different. And within days, it was over. No explanation. No clear reason. Just distance. At first, I thought it was bad luck. Timing. Chemistry. All the things people use to explain why something doesn't work. But when it kept happening, over and over, it stopped feeling random. It started feeling personal. Like there was something I wasn't seeing. Something I wasn't understanding. Because it couldn't just be coincidence. Not every time. Not with every person. I remember one date clearly. Her name was Olivia. She was easy to talk to. Warm. Engaged. The kind of person who made conversation feel effortless. We sat in a small cafe. Talked for hours. And for the first time in a long time, it felt different. Real. Like there was something there. Something that could actually grow. When we left, she smiled. I had a really good time, she said. Me too. And I meant it. Fully. There was no doubt in that moment. No uncertainty. This felt like something. Something that didn't disappear the second we walked away. We texted later that night. The next day, everything felt consistent. Natural. And for once, I didn't feel like I was guessing. Like I was trying to interpret signals. It just flowed. Until it didn't. 2 days later, her responses slowed down. Shorter. Less engaged. And I felt it immediately. That shift. That familiar change. And I did what I always did. Tried to adjust. Tried to bring the energy back. Asked better questions. Put in more effort. But it didn't work. Because once something shifts like that, you can't force it back. And then, the message came. You're really nice, but I don't think I feel a connection. That sentence. I had seen it before. Heard it before. Felt it before. But this time, it hit differently. Because everything had felt right. There were no signs. No obvious problems. No reason for it to end like that. And that's what made it worse. Because I couldn't explain it. Couldn't point to anything and say, that's what went wrong. And when you can't explain something, you start looking inward. You start questioning things. Not just what happened, who you are. And that's where the tension began. Not in the dates. Not in the outcomes. Inside me. Because I started noticing a pattern. Not in them. In me. The way I spoke. The way I responded. The way I handled silence. The way I tried to maintain something. And slowly, something uncomfortable started forming. A question I didn't want to ask. What if the problem isn't them? What if it's something I'm doing without realizing it? And that thought, once it appears, it doesn't leave. It stays in every conversation, every date, every interaction. Because now, you're not just experiencing it. You're analyzing it, watching yourself, trying to understand what you might be doing wrong. And that changes everything. Because it makes something that used to feel natural, feel controlled. And when something feels controlled, it stops feeling real. That's where everything started to shift. Not in my situation, in how I experienced it. Because now, every connection felt like something fragile. Something I could lose at any moment. Something I had to manage, maintain, protect. And that's when I realized, This wasn't just about not finding the right person. This was about something deeper, something I didn't fully understand yet, but I could feel it, and it was affecting everything, even when everything looked fine on the surface. And the worst part, I didn't know how to fix it. Not yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't random anymore, and until I understood what was really happening, nothing was going to change. Once you start believing the problem might be you, everything changes. Not just what happens, how you experience it. That's where I was. Not just going on dates anymore. Studying them. Replaying conversations in my head. Analyzing every word. Every pause. Every shift in tone. Trying to understand what I might have done wrong. And the more I looked, the more patterns I thought I saw. Not obvious ones. Subtle ones. The way I responded too quickly. Or waited too long. The way I tried to keep the conversation going when it started to fade. The way I adjusted myself to match what I thought they wanted. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. Not consciously. It just happened. Because when you start thinking something is fragile, you treat it differently. More carefully. More intentionally. Less naturally. And that's what I was doing. I stopped being present and started performing. Not in an obvious way. Not in a fake way. Just slightly adjusted. Slightly filtered. Slightly controlled. And that's enough to change everything. I went on more dates. Told myself I just needed more experience. More chances. More opportunities to get it right. That's what people say. Keep putting yourself out there. So I did. But something felt different now. Every date felt like a test. Not something to enjoy. Something to pass. And when you approach something like that, it shows. Even if you don't realize it. I remember another date. Her name was Rachel. We met through an app. Talked for a few days. Everything seemed promising. She was thoughtful. Funny. Easy to talk to. We met at a small restaurant. Dim lighting. Quiet. The kind of place that feels comfortable enough for a real conversation. At first, it went well. Like always. We talked. Shared stories. Laughed. Everything felt good. Not amazing, but solid. And I felt that familiar thought again. This could work. But then, I noticed something. A small shift. The kind I'd started to recognize. She leaned back slightly. Paused longer before responding. Her energy changed. Just a little. Enough for me to feel it. And instead of staying in the moment, I reacted. Internally. Something's off. You need to fix it. That's what my mind did. Automatically. And that's when everything changed. Not externally. Internally. Because I stopped listening. Stopped being present. Started thinking. Trying to adjust. Trying to bring the energy back. I asked more questions. Try to be more engaging. More interesting. More at something. And the more I tried, the worse it felt. Because now, it wasn't natural anymore. It was effort. And effort, when it's felt, creates distance. Even if you think you're doing the right thing. The date ended politely. Like they always did. I had a nice time. Me too. Smiles. Nothing awkward. Nothing obviously wrong. And I already knew. Before I even got home. It wasn't going anywhere. And I hated that I knew. Because it meant this pattern was real. Not random. Not coincidence. Something consistent. Something I was part of. And later that night, the message came. You're great. I just didn't feel a strong connection. Different words. Same meaning. And that's when something shifted again. Because now, it wasn't just happening. I was expecting it. And when you start expecting something, you start creating it. Without realizing it. That's what I began to understand. Not fully, but enough to feel it. Because every time I sat across from someone, part of me was already preparing for it to end. Already watching for signs. Already trying to prevent something that hadn't even happened yet. And that changes how you show up. More than anything else, I started pulling back in small ways. Not completely. Just enough to protect myself. Not investing too much too early. Not showing too much interest. Not allowing myself to feel something fully. Because I didn't want to feel that same ending again. And ironically, that made it worse. Because now, I wasn't fully there. And people feel that. Even if they can't explain it. I became safe. Predictable. Easy to talk to. But not compelling. Not someone you feel something strong with. And I didn't understand that at first. Because I thought I was doing everything right. Being respectful. Being thoughtful. Being consistent. All the things you're told matter. But something was missing. And I could feel it. Even if I couldn't define it yet. I remember one moment clearly. Not during a date. After one. I was sitting alone. In my apartment. Quiet. Still. No distractions. And for the first time, I stopped analyzing the dates and started analyzing myself. Not what I said, not what I did, how I felt. And I realized something that didn't make sense at first. I wasn't actually enjoying it. Not fully. I was focused on outcome, on whether it would lead somewhere, on whether it would work. And when you focus on outcome, you lose the moment. You stop being present. You stop connecting naturally. And connection, that's not something you can force, or manage, or control. It either happens, or it doesn't. And I have been trying to control it. Every time, without realizing it. And that realization, it stayed with me. Because it changed how I saw everything. Not just dating. Myself. The way I approach people. The way I handled uncertainty. The way I reacted to silence. And I started asking a different question. Not, why doesn't it work? But, what am I doing that makes it not work? And that's where things started to get uncomfortable. Because the answer wasn't simple. And it wasn't something I could fix overnight. Because it wasn't about one thing. It was about how I showed up. Every time. Without even realizing it. And that meant, if I wanted something to change, I had to understand something deeper. Something I hadn't looked at before. Not in them. In me. And that's when everything started to become clear. Slowly. Uncomfortably. But undeniably. There's a point where you stop blaming the outcome. And start questioning the pattern. That's where I was. Not just noticing that things didn't work. Understanding that something about the way I approached them was creating the same ending every time. And that's when it gets uncomfortable. Because once you see a pattern in yourself, you can't ignore it anymore. You can't blame timing, or chemistry, or just not the right person. Because if it keeps happening, it's not random. It's something you carry into every situation. Something that follows you. And I started to see it more clearly. Not in one moment. In many small ones. I began paying attention differently. Not to what they were doing. To what I was feeling. Before. During. After. Because for the first time, I realized that my experience of these moments wasn't neutral. It was shaped by something inside me. I went on another date. Not because I felt excited. Because I wanted to observe. Her name was Megan. We met through a mutual friend. Which felt different. More natural. Less pressure. At least that's what I told myself. We met for coffee. Simple. Low expectation. The kind of setting where things can just be. And for the first few minutes, I tried something different. I didn't think ahead. Didn't analyze. Didn't try to control anything. I just responded. Listened. Spoke when it felt natural. And something shifted. Not dramatically, but enough to feel it. It felt lighter. Less forced. More real. And for a moment, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I'd figured something out. Maybe it really was just about being more relaxed. More present. But then, it happened again. That small shift. That subtle change in energy. The thing I had started to recognize instantly. And this time, I didn't try to fix it. I just noticed it. And more importantly, I noticed what happened inside me. That same reaction. That internal tension. That need to adjust. To regain control. To bring it back to where it was. And that's when I saw it. Clearly. For the first time. The shift wasn't just happening between us. It was happening inside me. Before anything external had even fully changed. I felt it. And I reacted to it. And that reaction. That's what changed everything. Because the moment I felt that shift, I stopped being present. I became focused. On her. On the outcome. On whether it was slipping away. And that focus. It altered how I showed up. Even if I didn't say anything different. Even if my words were the same. Something about my energy changed. And people feel that. They don't always know why. But they feel it. That's what I started to understand. It wasn't what I was saying. It was what I was carrying. That tension. That awareness. That subtle pressure to make something work. And that's what created distance. Not because I did something wrong. Because I stopped being natural. And that realization. It hit differently. Because it wasn't about fixing a behavior. It was about understanding something deeper. Why I reacted that way in the first place. Why I felt that shift so quickly. Why I couldn't just stay in the moment. Without trying to control it. That's where the real question began. Not, what am I doing wrong? But, why am I doing it? And that question, it doesn't have a quick answer. Because it's not about one situation. It's about something that exists across all of them. Something consistent. Something internal. And I started thinking about it more. Outside of dates. Outside of interactions. Just in general. How I respond to uncertainty. To silence. To things I can't control. And I realized something uncomfortable. I don't sit well with not knowing. Not in relationships. Not in life. I try to understand everything. Predict everything. manage everything, because it makes me feel in control. And in most areas of life, that works. Work, routine, structure. You can control outcomes to some extent, but connection, that doesn't work the same way. You can't manage it. You can't predict it. You can't force it into a direction. And every time I tried, even subtly, it created the opposite effect. It pushed things away. Not because I did something obvious, because I changed the space from something natural into something controlled. And that's not something people are drawn to. That's something they feel and instinctively step away from. Not consciously, just intuitively. And that's when everything clicked. The discovery wasn't about them. It wasn't about timing. It wasn't about bad luck. It was about how I handled uncertainty, how I reacted to moments that weren't guaranteed, how I tried to secure something before it had a chance to exist on its own. And that realization, it changed everything. Because now, I wasn't looking at dates as something to succeed in. I was looking at myself, at how I existed inside those moments, at what I brought into them. And for the first time, I understood something I hadn't before. The reason it kept happening wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It was because I wasn't allowing anything to unfold naturally. I was trying to shape it too early, too subtly, too consistently. And that's what people were reacting to, not me. The pressure I didn't even realize I was creating. And that's a hard thing to accept, because it means the problem isn't something external you can fix. It's something internal you have to understand and change. And that's not immediate. That's not easy. But at least, now I knew. And knowing is where everything starts to shift, even if you don't know exactly what to do next yet. But you know one thing. If nothing changes inside you, nothing changes outside of you. And I wasn't willing to stay in that pattern anymore. Not now that I could finally see it. Once you understand the pattern, you face something even harder. Changing it. Because awareness feels powerful at first. Like you figured something out. Like you finally see what's been happening. But then, you step back into the same situation and realize, understanding it doesn't mean you can stop it. Not immediately. That's where I was. I knew what I was doing. I knew how I reacted. I knew where the tension came from. But knowing that didn't automatically make me different. I went on another date. Not because I felt ready. Because I needed to see if anything had actually changed. Her name was Lauren. We met through work. Not directly. Just overlapping circles. Which made it feel less forced. More organic. At least on the surface. We met for a drink. Simple. No pressure. No expectations. At least. That's what I told myself. And for the first few minutes, I stayed present. Really present. I listened. Responded naturally. Didn't think ahead. Didn't analyze. And it felt different. Calmer. Like I wasn't trying to control anything. Like I was just there. And for a moment, I thought maybe that was enough. Maybe awareness had already changed something. But then, it happened again. That subtle shift. The thing I could recognize now almost instantly. Her attention moved slightly. Her energy changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. And I felt it. That same internal reaction. That pull. The need to do something. To adjust. To regain what felt like it was slipping. And this time, I didn't act on it immediately. I paused. Just noticed it. And something interesting happened. The feeling passed. Not completely. But enough. Enough for me to stay where I was. Instead of reacting. Instead of trying to fix something that wasn't broken yet. And that was new. Because before, I never paused. I reacted instantly. Adjusted without thinking. And that's what changed everything. But now, there was space. A small gap. Between what I felt and what I did. And inside that gap, I had a choice. And for the first time, I chose not to act. Not to control. Not to manage the moment. Just to let it be what it was. And something shifted. Not in her. In me. Because I stayed present. Even when things felt uncertain. Even when I didn't know where it was going. Even when part of me wanted to take control again. I didn't. And the conversation continued. Naturally. Without force. Without pressure. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't focused on the outcome. I wasn't thinking about what this meant. Whether it would lead somewhere. Whether it would work. I was just experiencing it. Moment by moment. And that changed everything. Because connection doesn't happen in the future. It happens in the present. And I had never really been there before. Not fully. The date ended. Like they always do. But this time, it felt different. Not because I knew where it was going. Because I didn't. But because I hadn't tried to control it. I hadn't forced anything. I hadn't reacted to every small shift. And for once, I didn't feel exhausted afterward. I didn't replay every moment. Didn't analyze every word. I just let it be. And that was new. Later that night, I realized something. This wasn't about getting it right. It wasn't about saying the perfect thing or avoiding mistakes. It was about presence, about being there, without trying to shape the outcome. And that sounds simple, but it's not, because it requires something most people don't think about. Letting go, of control, of certainty, of the need to know what something means before it has a chance to become anything. And that's uncomfortable, because it means you can't protect yourself the same way. You can't predict. You can't manage. You can't guarantee anything. You just experience it. And that's where the real shift happened. Not in the date. In my mindset. Because I stopped seeing connection as something I needed to secure and started seeing it as something that either happens or doesn't, without me forcing it, without me controlling it. And that realization, it changed everything. Not instantly, not perfectly, but fundamentally. Because now, I wasn't trying to fix something anymore. I was allowing something to exist. Or not. And that's the twist. The thing I didn't expect. The problem was never that I couldn't find someone. It was that I didn't know how to be in something without trying to control it. And once I stopped doing that, everything felt different. Not easier, just real. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Even if I didn't know what would happen next. The hardest part about changing something in yourself is trusting that it will actually lead somewhere. Because when you let go of control, you also let go of certainty. And for someone like me, that felt uncomfortable, almost unnatural. But at the same time, it felt necessary. After that date with Lauren, I didn't overthink it. That alone was new. I didn't sit there replaying every moment. Didn't analyze what she said. Didn't try to predict what would happen next. I just waited. Not passively, not anxiously, just without trying to force anything. And that space, it changed how everything unfolded. She texted the next day. Simple. I had a really nice time. And for the first time, that message didn't feel like something I needed to hold on to tightly. Didn't feel like something fragile. It just felt normal. I responded, naturally, without overthinking, without trying to say the perfect thing. And the conversation continued, easily, without pressure, without that underlying tension I used to carry into everything. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't about doing more. It was about doing less. Less control, less analysis, less need to secure something before it even exists. Because connection doesn't need to be forced. It needs space. And I had never given it that before. We saw each other again. And again. Not constantly. Not intensely. Just consistently. Naturally. And every time, I reminded myself of one thing. Stay present. Not perfect. Not impressive. Just present. And something started to build. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But steadily. In a way that felt different from anything I had experienced before. Because this time, I wasn't trying to make it happen. I was allowing it to happen. And that changed everything. One evening, we were sitting across from each other. Talking. Laughing. Nothing special. Nothing significant. Just a moment. And I felt it. Not the excitement I used to chase. Something quieter. Something deeper. Comfort. The kind that doesn't come from effort. The kind that exists when you're not trying to be anything other than who you are. And I realized, this is what I had been missing. Not the right person. The right way of being. Because it wasn't about finding someone who would finally stay. It was about becoming someone who could be in something, without trying to control it, without turning it into something fragile, without constantly checking if it was still there. And that realization, that was the emotional climax. Because it changed how I saw everything. Not just dating. Myself. The way I approached uncertainty. The way I handled not knowing. The way I try to manage outcomes in areas where control doesn't work. And I understood something I hadn't before. The reason nothing worked wasn't because I wasn't enough. It was because I didn't trust the process. I didn't trust that something could grow without me guiding it, without me securing it, without me making sure it wouldn't disappear. And in trying to protect it, I was destroying it. Every time, without realizing it. And now, I wasn't doing that anymore. Not perfectly, not always, but enough. Enough to create something real, something that didn't feel forced. Something that didn't feel like it could disappear at any moment. Because I wasn't holding on to it tightly anymore. I was just in it. And that's the lesson. Not just about relationships. About life. If you're constantly trying to control something, you're not experiencing it. You're managing it. And the more you manage, the less real it becomes. Because real things, they need space. They need uncertainty. They need the freedom to either exist or not, without you forcing them into a shape they're not ready to take. So if you're watching this, and you feel like something never works out, like things always start well and then fade, ask yourself one thing. Not what they're doing. Not what's going wrong externally. What are you doing? In a moment things start to feel uncertain. Are you staying present? Or are you trying to control it? Because that difference, it changes everything. I didn't suddenly become someone else. I didn't transform overnight. I just stepped back, allowed things to unfold, stopped trying to secure something before it had a chance to exist. And that was enough. Not to guarantee anything, but to finally experience something real. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Not more effort, less control. Because the moment you stop trying to hold on to something so tightly is the moment it finally has space to stay.